Left me outside and you said, hey, you can eat whatever you want outside, I would go out and I would search for the food more. But if you left me in a grocery store and, hey, you can eat whatever in here, then I'm not really going to search. I'm going to stay in that one area. Morning, homesteaders and gardeners. It is a warm day, as you can tell. I got to talk about furrows versus planting in holes. It's like the ultimate debate. And if you've never really thought about it, then maybe it will become a debate for you. And today I'm going to give you I'd say about my 0.25 cents of it. I've been kind of testing it out for the past couple of years, and from what we've seen some good results with planting in furrows, so we're going to keep that going. But it's obviously a nice day. My doctor told me I was low on vitamin D, so I'm going to try and get some vitamin D today. But we're going to plant some bok choy, and in that process I'm going to talk a little bit about fertilizing in a hole versus fertilizing in a furrow. Before we get started, I just want to show you one thing. We had a major mistake in this bed. This is the potato bed. And I had said how I wasn't going to water it. Well, I accidentally left the water on and then my timers came on. But not only that, you can see here where this hose had popped out. And so it just kind of flooded this whole area. Oopsie daisy, what can I say? So what I'll probably do is I'll just leave the water off for the next couple watering sessions until I see some growth, and then we'll kind of get back into watering it again. But that was kind of a mistake. But I think letting it dry out and all that, it should be okay, especially because it's warm. But we're supposed to get a freeze next week, so we'll see how that goes as well. But in this bed behind me, we have an empty row, albeit small. We still have an empty row, so I'm going to throw some bok choy in there right now. It's a good time of year for it. We get a very slow or very small amount of time for it, so I'm going to try and get as much in as I can. And so we're going to add that to this bed right now. So we put some cabbage in here the other day, and I'm not sure if that's going to make it all the way to the end game. You know, the final date for these is a little up in the air, but we figured we had some space, so let's throw them in. And then here we've got some carrots on this row, and the freeze this year, the Arctic blast or whatever you want to call it, really stunted them. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to pull up right here, and we may end up just pulling up the rest of these as we get close. But I mean, there's no point. I mean, you know, I got better things to do than just wait on that. So we'll pull this up and then just kind of get this going. That's not a bad little carrot. A little bit of time may have done it well. And again, that's not even a baby carrot. But we can go through, and it is what it is. I'm certainly not going to fret about a couple carrots here and there. I mean, what can I do? I can't change anything with the weather. So we're going to get this furrow dug. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to tell you kind of my thoughts about that situation. First of all, I'm really loving this Warren hoe we got here. This works very good for the furrow making and planting and stuff like that. I'm really feeling this a lot. I do wish it was beveled out a little bit more, but whatever. So I'm going to take my hoe and I'm going to run right across my drip line here and just go along the row. And I want to drag it this way because I'm a little low on soil up here, because we could not fill it when we were doing it because the carrots were there. But you know, the theory behind all of this is when you fertilize, you got to think about the plant roots and where they want to go and what they want to do. And also think about the health of your soil and what you're doing with it. And so like right now, just by doing this, we're kind of activating our soil a little bit. We're getting a little bit more air into it. So that works out good. It helps with compaction, which, as you know, I've had issues with in my wild garden. So we're going to try and make a habit of this too, because instead of just doing a hole here and a hole here and a hole here, and in between it just kind of stays compacted, this is going to help mix it up a bit. And I mean, not to mention, just by doing this, you know, I've seen like 6 worms right here. So I know that we've got some life in the soil and it's doing well. So the question becomes, if you plant in a furrow and you put fertilizer down and then you plant on top of it, what are the roots going to do? Are the roots going to stay in that area and look for the food, or are they going to start to spread out? Because we know that if we get more soil, more roots, and we get better growth, and so then we get healthier soil too, because then it's going through and it's going to continuously aerate that soil more and more. So that's kind of the theory. So historically, I've always just kind of dug a hole, thrown a handful of fertilizer, and went to town, started growing or whatever. And I didn't really want to continue that. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to kind of improve my soil a little bit, because soil health is a lot more important than people would think when it comes to growing. I mean, you can fertilize until the cows come home, but if you don't have healthy soil to start off with, and you don't have air and nutrients and stuff like that, like the whole shebang, then you kind of got an issue that you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle throughout the year. So, you know, with these bok choy here, they're such fast growers that we want to make sure that the soil is nice and healthy and ready to accept all of our nutrients. And that's where these furrows could in fact help with that. Look at this. This is so dense in here that things just don't want to come out. So I'm sure you've probably seen me in the past where I just dig it and then I throw the fertilizer in and then plant on top of it. And so my theory, and I've read a little bit about this, and it does make sense that if you take this plant right here and you put it in a hole and the food's in this hole, then typically the roots will stay in this area. Now, if you think about it, if you open up that furrow and you put the fertilizer in there, and you're still going to pile up dirt around it, obviously, but there's food down below, I would think that the roots are going to come down and they're going to search for that food a little bit more. I mean, if you think about it, left me outside and you said, hey, you can eat whatever you want outside, I would go out and I would search for the food more. But if you left me in a grocery store and, hey, you can eat whatever in here, then I'm not really going to search. I'm going to stay in that one area and just look around. I mean, it's less energy used, right? So by making that fertilizer available all the way through, not only are you allowing this plant, and this is all my theory now, not only are you allowing this plant to search for food, but you're also giving other plants in the rows next to it an opportunity to find food as well. Now, will you get some competing? I'm sure you will. But at the same time, I think you're going to have stronger growth from each plant. Now, this doesn't just apply for fertilizer. This always also applies for like compost, anything that could feed a plant. So for instance, when I've planted some things in furrows in recent years, I've noticed that the roots have indeed been longer and more sprawling than if I've planted in holes. When usually, a lot of times I'll plant like a tomato plant in a hole, and when I pull it up, the roots are real compact in that area. They haven't really gotten a good chance to sprawl out, and I think that's what kind of can hurt your harvest in the long run. Because I mean, you want to get those roots as big as possible, as fast as possible, to find nutrients, to grow bigger fruits and more leaves. Another thing I thought about too is when you're digging the furrow, you're disturbing that top surface of soil, which can help you with weed control as well, versus like spot digging holes and planting. So I think that might make a big difference as well, because you're not actually, like I'll come in, like you can see in my onion beds, well, you can't really see now, but there's lines going through the middle of each row. And that's where I've taken that hoe and I've just drug it across the top to disturb the surface, kill any weeds or anything like that. So when I'm doing that furrow, in all of these beds back here behind me, it's like I'm disturbing all of that surface so that I can go ahead and disturb it and not have those weeds really take hold. You can pull them up, they can dry out on the surface, stuff like that, and they don't really get to take a foothold in your garden. Versus doing it like a hole at a time, you do leave a lot of undisturbed ground that could have weeds take more foothold in your garden, and then you just got to fight to get rid of it. And let's face it, of all the things in gardening, weeds is the one thing that's just not as fun. Just like that, where we had, 2 feet of space in between, now we've got a solid row of bok choy that is going to just leave it open, or not leave it open, but eliminate space for weeds to grow in between our radishes and our cabbages. And I think that's going to be a big benefit moving forward, and we're using up that space. Now, I could have planted this a little bit more intensively, but because of the cabbage and the way that it should grow, if it has enough time, it will end up taking up that space there. So the thought is that this bok choy will come up in, let's say, 15 to 20 days. We'll be able to pull it up, and then the cabbage can start to take over from there, fill in the gaps between that and the radishes that are going to grow as well. Just because it goes by the book and says you can plant X amount in a square foot, sometimes it just doesn't work out based on what's around it and based on how I want to take care of it. So I think last year I did the same thing with tomatoes, where I dug a hole and I planted it in the hole. And I think this year I'm just going to go ahead and do a deep furrow and just fertilize all the way through. And then that way I'll allow it to kind of get more of a foothold, and I'll be able to see, in fact, if the roots do spread even farther with the tomatoes, because you do have to plant those deeper. So we may do a furrow, but then we'll also do spot dig in that furrow a little bit deeper, so we can get as much of that stem in the ground as possible so it can produce more roots. So you want to focus on roots. I can't stress that enough. Whatever you see on the surface, you need to be even more concerned about what's happening down below, because that's where you're going to get your growth. That's what's going to determine your harvest and the health of your plant and resilience to different pests and diseases and stuff like that. My question to you, and I am looking for a healthy debate here, is what do you think? Planting it in a hole or a furrow? Which do you think works better, and which have you used? So I'm curious to know, and I'm looking for a healthy debate because I'm kind of on the fence either way. I mean, first of all, the furrow is easier. It's a lot quicker to go ahead and get the fertilizer in, and I feel like I'm injecting more of the fertilizer into the soil than just sprinkling it on the surface or in a hole. So I am inclined to think that, but is it really worth it? And does it work for everything? That's the other thing too. There's so many variables to all of this. So if you have an opinion on this, and a healthy opinion, please let us know in the comments below, because I feel like it can help other people in making their decision on what to do. And this is the time of year when people are starting to plant their gardens and figure it out, to where we can really get maybe a jump start and get some healthier roots for our gardens so we can have a better harvest this year. Goodbye.